I'm with Yashwant Deshmukh, Director of C-Voter Polling Agency, and Rahul Verma, Senior Fellow at the Center for Policy Research right here in New Delhi, amongst India's most perceptive political analysts and familiar faces at ThePrint. And today we're discussing Modi at 8, which is 8 years of the Modi government in power. We know that most of North India has been colored saffron these last 8 years. The Congress party has reduced its footprint only to Rajasthan and Chhattisgarh. Southern India is still mostly in the hands of the opposition regional parties, whether it's the TMC in West Bengal, Stalin in Tamil Nadu, the DMK in Tamil Nadu. In Kerala, you have the CPM, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, and Maharashtra, of course, where you have the opposition ruling coalition, opposition to the ruling party, of course. But I'd like both of you to put your thinking caps on and explain to me this is clearly, in a sense, 2 years to go for the big election in 2024. So Rahul, your first comments, but before that, welcome, gentlemen, welcome to ThePrint.
Thank you. Thank you, Jyoti. Thank you. My first comments on Modi at 8, I think you have to look at Modi era at least in three ways. First is political. What Modi has managed to do for himself and his party, that he has managed to almost double the vote share of BJP and has expanded the BJP among groups and in states where BJP was not present or was very, very weak. So that's the electoral political success of BJP. Okay. Second, what he has managed to do, and in terms of each prime minister or government is going to have certain credits, certain successes, and certain failures. And one of the successes, if you look at Prime Minister Narendra Modi's in the governance area, would be basically improving delivery of welfare benefits by far, right? Like the efficiency in delivery has increased, the reach of schemes like Ujjwala and certain direct credit transfers is phenomenal. So I think in the area of governance, welfare, delivery, that would be the second. And the third one, at least this is a PMO heavy government, right? And it's the nature, this is PMO heavy also because it's a dominant party and leader has a very, very high acceptability, not just among the voters and as well as among the supporters and the MPs. So what you're seeing that the PMO heavy government is trying to create an image, not just in India, but also outside, basically a heavy focus on self-reliance. So whether like one can call them as mere words or mere phrases, but self-reliance both in terms of domestic policy, but also trying to present India on the international fora.
Okay. Yashwant, you have your C-Voter agency has come out with a minister's report card with some very interesting, very startling results. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Of course, yes. This is an exercise that we do every year, around this point, this time. And we simply ask the voters, all India, verbatim, which are the ministers they have heard the names and how do they rate their performance in the last 1 year on a 0 to 10 scale. And few of the names which were like, say, for example, I was pretty much expecting Gadkari's name to come on the top because of the highways that are being built and being, he has been in news and people are discussing about his work. Mm-hmm. But for our surprise, Rajnath Singh as the defense minister being rated not just by the BJP voters, but by the opposition voters as well as the number one or a top performing, that has stumped me, honestly speaking, because I wasn't expecting that. In terms of that, Rajnath Singh has been largely non-controversial or non in the news, if I may say.
Yeah, he doesn't speak very much.
Exactly. And it makes us to sit and notice that why exactly this has happened.
So what about Home Minister Amit Shah, who is actually so powerful and who is on our screens and in the newspapers everywhere?
He is number 3 among the BJP voters and close number 3. I wouldn't say that there is a huge gap between Rajnath Singh, Nitin Gadkari and Amit Shah. They all range between 7 to 8 points on a 10 scale. But and again, without any surprise, Mr. Amit Shah ranks at number 15 as far as the ranking by the opposition voters are concerned.
Right.
So that only underlines the kind of polarizing impact he has among the politicians. But overall speaking, to see Rajnath Singh and Nitin Gadkari across the board coming at number 1 and number 2, somewhere it tells me that the large size electorate out there still is not polarized in a way. They still like to see what we may call it an Atal school of politics, Atal Bihari Vajpayee mold of politics in that way, that is sober and non-confrontalist in nature. One who can talk to across the aisle, talk to everybody. Say Rajnath Singh, funnily and oddly, he is highly rated among, say for example, land-owning farmers and Sikhs, which is a constituency where all other ministers have rated really poorly in that way. And then you remember that, okay, he is the only minister who actually went across to talk to the farmers during that controversial period. And farmers were really respecting him for doing so.
But did you also rate Prime Minister Narendra Modi, or he was not part of it?
No. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is a standalone persona, and his popularity certainly supersedes everybody.
Okay.
No doubt about that, because we also reported, post-Bengal elections, when his ratings went down in our India Today See Voter Mood of the Nation tracker. We reported when it went to historic low from his own parameter. From the highs of 70s, he went down to 36 at one point of time. And this was the time when the second wave of COVID, everything was going wrong. And then it took some time, and it was classical to observe that his ratings got repaired with the vaccination program, delivery of the vaccination program. Yeah. The more the vaccinations happened, bit by bit, his popularity repaired. He is back into the 50s easily, still not in the 70s, by the way, but very well ahead of the curve from when you compare to the opposition politicians as well as the politicians from his own party. There's no competition. But out here, I think the polarizing names like Amit Shah or Yogi, for that matter, when you put Yogi's name among the rating of the chief ministers, when we did the 26th of Jan cover issue of India Today, we figured out that people across India did say Yogi must be a good chief minister. When you talk about giving his name as giving the name of the best CM, they feel. But when you talked about the rating your own CM, Mr. Yogi came as at number 17. He was not even in the top 15 best performing chief ministers.
So that's
a very classical phrase. Yeah.
So in this particular survey, Rajnath Singh comes out. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh is number 1. Nitin Gadkari, Roads and Transport, is number 2. Amit Shah is number 3. But what about the women ministers? Nirmala Sitharaman, finance minister,
unfortunately for Nirmala Sitharaman, she hasn't scored that well that she might have expected. The other women minister, Smriti Irani, she has scored well in certain pockets which are very critical. For example, youth, Dalits, low income group, low education group, basically bottom of the pyramid, which is electorally important. So it's a very classical mix. But for me, after Rajnath Singh, the second stumping was Rahul. It was among the housewives. The way they rated Gajendra Shekhawat at the top one, I mean, that was completely stumping, because I was like, यार गजेंद्र शेखावत राजस्थान के पॉलिटिशियन है, राजस्थान के बाहर कितने लोग उनका नाम भी जानते हैं? Hardly, not many people. But when you talk, and honestly speaking, if we would have asked only about Gajendra Shekhawat, probably a huge majority would have said, हमने नाम नहीं सुना. When we talk about the ministry along with the minister, Jal Shakti minister like that, then you realize that it's basically the program which is propelling.
So the Nal Se Jal. So if everybody gets water in the tap,
exactly.
Vote na de.
Exactly. And then housewives rating that ministry on the top, it tells very clearly how the issues and the governance matters, how they are working in their mindset.
Right. Rahul, I'm going to ask you.
Critical in all these elections so far. And I do believe that they are going to remain critical in future.
So Rahul, this is one survey that C-Voter has done, Yashwant's company. But let me ask you to comment on this. What do you see from the results from this particular survey?
So my first reaction, because I've not seen the details of the survey, but what I heard from Yashwant Bhai, I largely agree with his framing of things. And his framing is based, like you see people like Nitin Gadkari and Rajnath Singh being rated over a minister like Amit Shah, and Yogi Adityanath getting not as much traction as you believe, that even among a large chunk of BJP voters, there is more sort of sympathy or alignment with middle of the road politician and middle of the road politics. Of course, that does not mean that they would not want ideological platforms associated with Hindu right to be put at first, but they don't want to go to extreme lengths.
No, but
right?
once again, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but look at all the results of the elections, whether it's UP, whether it's Madhya Pradesh. I mean, everything is polarized, especially in Uttar Pradesh. So that's the politics of polarization that plays itself out. I mean, you people have discussed this ad nauseum, Western UP se lekar Eastern UP tak. I mean, it is a politics.
But
now you are saying that governance issues are
wait. I don't think at any point Yashwant Bhai or I would have said the result is reflection of polarization, right? Our vote was totally polarized. So, at most times there is some degree of polarization in society. Forget about elections, right? There is always some degree of polarization. During election campaigns, sometimes politicians decide to take that polarization campaign a bit forward. It sticks sometimes and it doesn't stick sometimes, right? Even when you would notice that there is a high degree of polarization, it does not mean that voters are voting on that framework. Yes, if you look at UP election result, you would see that Hindus are voting on one side, except say certain communities, and Muslims are voting on other side. This was also reflected in a state like Bengal, but that does not mean that all BJP voters are voting for the BJP because they don't want to see Muslim legislators or Muslim ministers, or they do not like Samajwadi Party. So just to conclude this, say more women voted for BJP and less women voted for Samajwadi Party. This in itself suggests that there was certain what you would call law and order angle to the election. Now, law and order was also in campaigns tried to be polarized, right? So you can't see these things into black and white that, oh, anything which is polarized is bad and governance is always going to be good. Politicians are going to use what we call as segmented strategy, which is saying different things to different communities about the same thing. That's the genius.
At the same time.
Yes, at the same time. So, but I think this survey definitely makes us think, and Yashwant Bhai said in his opening remarks that he was surprised to see these numbers. We all are creatures of what we hear, right? But when we look at data, then we have to revise what our priors are. And so,
yeah, true that. And actually, I totally agree that even during the UP elections, we always maintain that, it's the ration and the law and order also, as I mentioned at point of time, courtesy the construction of the toilets. That was having more impact than the bulldozer image. That's what my understanding was. And currently, yes, that is.
No, sorry, Yashwant, let me interrupt you. Law and order, the construction of toilets, Ujjwala gas. Now, these governance issues you're saying is having a much greater impact than the bulldozer. But on the other hand, so are these parallel streams of polarization and governance? But as Rahul suggests, they're also intersecting.
They are intersecting. As I said, if you will ask Rajnath Singh about Ayodhya or Ram Temple, or say about Nitin Gadkari about Ayodhya and Ram Temple, they are not going to say something which is absolutely ideologically different from their colleague or their mother organization is. They will proudly say Jai Shri Ram. They are not going to. But it's not about what your ideological positioning is. It's about what is your brand identity, what is your core construct. in terms of political governance, in terms of delivery of governance.
No, but Yashwant, look at it today. The big controversy today is on the Gyanvapi Masjid in Banaras. Now, I don't know when your survey was done, whether it was done before that.
No, it was done. It was done right in the last 2 weeks.
Which is when the Gyanvapi is also
Absolutely.
right there.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but still, despite that, from what I see, your voters or the people that you're speaking to, they are not actually talking about the politics of polarization. मतलब वो दिमाग में उनके जरूर होगा या है या नहीं है, नहीं हम बता सकते।
दिमाग में डेफिनेटली है, क्योंकि जब हम ज्ञानवापी के ऊपर अलग से क्वेश्चन हम पोस्ट करते हैं तो उसके ऊपर वैसे जवाब आते हैं।
क्या कहते हैं लोग?
के ऊपर लगभग नहीं, उसमें प्रो हिंदू सेंटिमेंट पूरी तरीके से प्रो टेम्पल है एट ज्ञानवापी। उसमें that kind of polarization is there. As Rahul said, that these things are, let me put it this way, even big number of Hindus voting for opposition party are saying they want the temple out there. I mean, does that make sense? They doesn't mean that they are going to vote for the BJP. So many a times your welfare schemes cut across the ideological line, and many a times ideological positioning cuts across the political lines. It's never in a black and white scenario, Jyoti. It's too much of gray area, and this is what we need to appreciate, that the collective wisdom of this country, the common man of this country, it does give you a leverage of too much of gray area, which is a binding force of sort. Because if everything is in 0 and 1, then there is no gray area. There is nothing of binding in the society.
That is fine, Yashwant, that is absolutely fine. लेकिन राहुल, आप मुझे बताइए, मुझे ज्ञानवापी को हटा के मंदिर भी चाहिए, अयोध्या तो मुझे मिल गया, अब मुझे मथुरा में भी मंदिर चाहिए. I also want my gas. I also want कि roads बहुत अच्छे बने. तो मुझे सब कुछ चाहिए. But my question to you is, what about the Muslims? What are they saying? So is that Hindu-Muslim polarization, where is that looking? How do you look at that today?
So let me first add to what Yashwant Bhai was saying. See, time and again, and surveys have been suggesting us, and this is where it's our mistake as analysts, we confuse, and especially people on opinion pages make this mistake. Pro-Hindu sentiment does not mean anti-Muslim sentiment, right? So you will keep hearing things like, we want Ayodhya mein mandir. But if you start telling Hindu voters that mandir can only be constructed by demolishing a mosque, people will not be agreeing, right? You
will not agree. People will not agree.
No, yes, not agree. There is no support for violence against Muslim. There is no support. In fact, Pew survey clearly pointed out, and this is like basically the large sentiment of India is that हमें हमारी तरह से रहने दो, आप अपनी तरह से रहो. Basically where we failed as like the push of secularism, where it failed, is trying to put forward a framework on the society which is not ready to accept that kind of framework.
One second, right? Yashwant bhai, आप मुझे ये बताइए, what is this what I'm hearing कि ज्ञानवापी मस्जिद को वहीं रहना चाहिए और साथ साथ मंदिर तो है ही, ज्ञानवापी भी है, काशी विश्वनाथ भी है. So what is it? What is the argument?
I tell you what is it. I think if majority of the sentiment is asking probably closer to the chapter by accepting the truth and then start the reconciliation.
No, I don't understand.
Majority of the sentiments gets offended by the very assertion कि यहाँ पे तो कोई मंदिर था ही नहीं.
नहीं ये बस ये गलत है. औरंगजेब ने मंदिर तो गिराया है, इसमें कोई शक नहीं है.
ज्योति, मैं आपकी अपनी या राहुल की इंडिविजुअल्स की बात नहीं कर रहा हूँ, मैं ओवरऑल डिस्कशन ऑफ द सोसाइटी और नैरेटिव्स की बात कर रहा हूँ. they get offended with the narrative that कि यहाँ पे तो कुछ था ही नहीं. What I feel that big number of people out there want certain kind of a closure, with the acceptance and the truth in the history that gets appreciated and accepted.
Okay,
that
fine.
There was certain. We are going.
Okay. So now there is a मंदिर गिराया गया था, ज्ञानवापी मस्जिद बनाई गई थी औरंगजेब ने. But today, what are people saying?
Today, people are saying that probably accept it. And if there is a temple, if there is a shivling inside, or if there are some remnants inside, let there be some kind of a passage to continue that kind of puja. You do your namaz. If you wish to do your namaz, that's kind of equilibrium is there. By the way, which has been an equilibrium always at the local level.
But is that possible? Rahul, is that possible?
That's the irony of it. So when it gets politicized, Jyoti, which is wrong, politicizing it is bad, it's wrong, it's unaccepted, uncalled for. But unfortunately, while protesting against the politicization of such issues, the other side is looked upon as equally politicized. So that's a different discussion. We must do this at some other day with all the data, how we feel about it. But while talking about BJP, how they are incorporating this as into their central electoral doctrine and adding that on the top of it as the social welfareism, the way they are delivering. So the question is only of two understandings, Jyoti. That one line of understanding says that today's BJP's pyramid of success is base is Hindutva and little bit on the top of delivery of governance. While the data somehow suggests, and Rahul would agree with me, that it has got inverted. Now the majority of the electoral success of the BJP comes via solid base of welfareism, and the top, is of the ideological positioning.
But Rahul,
however, only single thing is unlikely to give them the electoral verdict that they are now getting for the 7 years in a row. So, only single thing is not going to work for them. That's also a hard electoral fact.
So Rahul, the BJP is very, very smart. I'm sure they study the data very, very well. I'm sure they understand this going forward. I'm sure they have understood this in the past as well, that India, like you are saying or indicating, is not as polarized as it is made out to be. Is my understanding correct?
That's true. Yeah.
But the question, okay, so going forward, how do you think? Do you think that the polarization could be muted in favor of bigger governance or welfare issues?
Depends. It depends on political elites. It depends on social and intellectual elites. You, three of us may want to lower this, but outside us, from our own ilk, people are going to basically not budge a position. Like how do you reduce polarization? The first step of reducing polarization to begin a conversation. And we all know now the conversation across the aisle on different issues is almost becoming negligible.
Absolutely.
And this is not just in big cities. If you think in that sense, this is now percolating even to small towns and rural areas where people are now self-selecting into their echo chambers and hardly communicate across the line. What Yashwant was pointing out, and which is very, very important, any issue which is a thorn in a relationship, whether it's social relationship or personal relationship, you have to have a discussion around that issue. What we did not do for many years after independence, there were you remember, like this term, and I like people may not like it, V.S. Naipaul's title of the book, The Wounded Civilization. You may disagree with his thesis, but the whole idea that a large section of the society has created certain narratives about what has happened in the past. And you just can't cover it up. You can't just ignore it up. At some point, you need to have conversations about all those wounds. Otherwise, it will blow up like it blows up.
This is something that is, you have really, I think, set the cat among the pigeons. You're bringing in V.S. Naipaul's Wounded Civilization. Firstly, that book is more than 30 years old. But if you are saying that conversations are not being held, question to you, Yashwant, is that are these conversations, earlier we used to think कि political parties across the political spectrum, Central Hall, Parliament के अंदर एक दूसरे से बात करते थे. तो आज की तारीख में आप क्या कह रहे हैं कि बातचीत ही नहीं होती between बीजेपी, कांग्रेस पार्टी, समाजवादी, यूपी के अंदर, बिहार के अंदर, पंजाब के अंदर, are there no conversations taking place about the country?
I doubt, and I'm sorry to say this, but we belong to a generation, Jyoti, you have seen that kind of politics when personal relationship across the political spectrum were used to matter a lot. People used to care about.
Jyoti Babu and Atal Bihari Vajpayee
exactly, and nowadays
had the best conversations outside Parliament.
I doubt it is there anymore, because I don't see people, attending each other's good or the bad times that much. This entire thing, and it is reflective in the societies as well. I mean, the social media has not done any good to that. It has, and there are studies after studies that the social media by its own algorithm has only pushed all of us to be in black or white.
No, but on the other hand, on the one hand, you're saying that polarization is not as complete in society.
Yeah.
So does that also mean that opposition parties, and we see this in the South, whether it's the DMK, whether it's the CPM, KCR's parties, we see this, that they are able to translate that into electoral success.
Right.
But the Congress footprint is shrinking. So what is that message?
That message is the same. You remember in the last time we were discussing, and we also touched upon the idea of how being a pro-Muslim is not at all a problem in electoral politics in India, but how getting branded as anti-Hindu is getting a problematic scenario for everybody in India. So that part is a real problem for majority of the political parties. However, having said that, the data consistently tells us that even after this extremities and the polarization and the narrative of hate and everything all around us, while people like us, the three of us and many other friends, we always feel like we are doomed. But the data also tells us, I mean, with the hope that, all is not lost. Basically, everybody has to appreciate that the huge majority out there is still not in black and white. They are still venturing in the gray. And this is probably, Jyoti, this is the reason that we are looking after split verdict, where people are voting differently at the Lok Sabha level and differently at the assembly level. If there wouldn't have been this gray area, it wouldn't have been this buffer, huge majority of the buffer electorate, this would not have been possible at all. Imagine that after Narendra Modi, kind of a popular prime minister, and the way he has changed the political discourse in this country, if I tell you that statistically speaking, BJP has lost 50% of elections in the last 7 years, that's a fact. And that is because people in India have this capacity to think beyond, think what their things are, and deliver spectacular verdicts in a very, very classical split voting phenomena. So that is also a fact.
So Rahul, explained to me, like you said, if the BJP has lost so many elections, which is absolutely which is a fact, half of India is colored saffron, but actually the other half is not. But the Congress is reducing its footprint. Now, is the Congress in these 8 years of Modi becoming a regional party? Is it, why is it not able to take advantage of the same opportunities that other regional parties are doing?
Jyoti, so just before Rahul says that, you said a very interesting, sorry Rahul, just interesting line. Half of India is colored saffron and half of India is not a geographic idea. Because it's the same half which gets colored saffron in one election and same half which refused to get saffronized at the other layer of election. So it's not a geographic thing to say. It's a different way of looking.
So you mean Lok Sabha is different and
exactly.
In this
please continue. I'm sorry.
But in this particular case, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, they have all voted saffron. They have all voted BJP, But anyway, we'll also. I mean, I take your point. But Rahul, your point as to why.
So there are two parts to this. First one is about BJP polarization. They're winning and they're losing. And why I'm saying this is BJP lost Jharkhand. And the explanation was that Jharkhand voters didn't like the politics and policies of Chief Minister Raghuvar Das, and that's why they voted them out of power. BJP wins the election in UP, and the first narrative which will come, the election was polarized. And so this is what basically, without looking at data, without doing deep, rigorous analysis of each and every election, we basically claim BJP's victory as a result of polarization and BJP's defeat as a result of governance vote.
No.
Whereas both these things are always present in all elections. As Yashwant Bhai mentioned, never basically, an election is not just won on one single factor, right? You may lose on one single thing, but for victory, you need confluence of many factors. So BJP, when it wins because of a certain degree of social polarization, because of its leadership, because of its performance.
And presumably the other regional parties are also doing a little bit of that.
Yeah, exactly. This is also beginning of your second part of the answer. Basically, the regional parties have figured out the template to challenge the BJP. Congress has still not figured out the template to challenge the BJP. What is regional parties basically doing in state elections? And this is why the map looks very, very different. They basically know there is no point in confronting Modi in state election directly. Take on the BJP state leadership. If BJP was in power, figure out where they missed on the governance and delivery and other things. If they were not in power and you were in power, then create a narrative. What did you manage to do? So basically focus on the strength and weakness of your own and the BJP. Avoid confrontation with Modi. Avoid confrontation on issues that are national. So you're not going to win a battle on nationalism. You are not going to win a battle on Hindutva at the moment. So make elections about state politics, about state level issues. I'm not saying Congress should do this, or Congress is a national party. But the problem with the Congress party, in my opinion, among many others, is that for many years, Congress has been not reading its victories and its defeat correctly. It didn't understand why it won or not won, why it got power in 2004, why it won in 2009, and why it lost in 2014. So because it does not understand both its victories and defeats, Congress party is now in a structural decline. Their story is now very, very different. I think we should stop having conversations on Congress.
I know last time also you said that, Congress is a dying party. And I think that has really startled a lot of people. I get a lot of feedback on that. Yashwant, the question to you is, as when Modi ji became Prime Minister in 2014, उस वक्त उन्होंने कहा था या पार्टी ने कहा था कि 75 एक informal sort of age limit होगा. Now he is turning about 70 years old. If in case BJP wins the 24 elections, he will still be Prime Minister. Perhaps the longest serving non-Congress Prime Minister, because Jawaharlal Nehru still, I think, has that record. But the question is that if Rajnath Singh, Nitin Gadkari and Amit Shah are in, at least today, if that is if these are the numbers, then after Modi, will it be Rajnath Singh, Nitin Gadkari, Amit Shah, or how does it work?
Tough call, Jyoti, because all three of them have been party president and rather successful party president at that. Their term as the party president has been quite successful. Of course, Amit Shah has much more success to his name. Because of obvious reasons. I mean, that the party, they were just on the roll at that time. But he is
not, in your survey, he is not seen as an alter ego of the Prime Minister?
Not really. Not in that way. That's the part of it that people like to see that how people would react. But that's not happening. It's so funny to see that we talk about the bipolar way of the things that they are happening. And we like to see that in the prism of religious lines. Either we used to see it in the Agada Pichda political line, or now that Hindu-Muslim political line.
Mm-hmm.
Great thing or odd thing is, I am watching a different kind of polarization.
Mm-hmm.
That is on gender line. I genuinely believe that we have got now two Indias voting in two different trajectories.
Mm-hmm.
We have got now equally or more asserting female voters of India, which have not only covered the 10% historic gender gap of turnout, but also overpassing the male turnout, and their agenda or their issues for electoral issues are absolutely different from the electoral issues of the males. And I'm saying this on record. Because when you talk about the issue number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, somehow the routine caste and religion issues just do not come into their entire agenda at all.
Interesting,
When,
very interesting.
when they count that, okay, and this is very evident from even from the ratings of the ministers. When you look into the way females are counting, Jal Shakti, I mean, they are looking at the tapped water as the issue that they are really following up on. When you look at the issues of Mehngai and the Garibi, it comes on their priority, even on the negative side as well, and how they are managing their kitchen, it becomes on the priority. But when you talk about the males, what have been the greatest, what uh, what you will call that success of Modi government in the last 7 years. They will come with the top 370 gone, good. Triple talaq gone, good. Ayodhya temple ban gaya, acha, Vishwanath record. These are the things will come in the top 10 of the males for sure, but they will not come in the top 10 of females for sure. So what I feel that this country, for obviously, I believe for good reason, is having a different level of polarization, which people are not really, marking it as the turning point of electoral politics in India. The more and more females, and now we also have the heartening news for the future as well, that for the first time we are likely to be more females in India than males in India. The data is suggesting, So, what does it tell us about in terms of politics in the next 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 years? As a country, as a society, which way are we moving?
But then on the other hand, you have fewer and fewer women politicians. That's also a contradiction in terms, no?
But they will come up. What I'm simply trying to say that that is an artificial gap, Jyoti, which has been created. And sometimes you need, just like you need affirmative action like reservation to fill up that gap forcefully. Sometimes you might even need probably a female reservation bill to get through and get us 33% of reservation at least for the female politicians, and all of a sudden it might change. You never know. Yeah. These are the things which are waiting in the branch. I believe I believe with a genuine sense of happiness, I'm telling you, that the more I see that the governance and delivery of governance, the way it is getting on the top priority of the female voters of India, the future looks bright for me. Regardless of what kind of narrative that we are looking at and what kind of debate that we are looking at it right now. But the fact that the huge, overwhelming majority of the females do not count these issues as their issues of day-to-day life.
Yeah.
That is quite a telling.
Okay. Rahul, you lost electricity, I believe, but you're so welcome back now. Yeah. But a couple of questions to you. If you think that governance is so important, or governance issues, welfare issues are so important, but somehow when we look around us, I mean, I have to say that Nitin Gadkari's road transport ministry is doing amazing work. It's transformed, large parts of the country. But a lot of things, I mean, fine, we can do glass half full, glass half empty, right? But I just have some data. India is home to 11 of the 15 most polluted cities in Central and South Asia. According to the TomTom Traffic Index, which covers 404 cities, Mumbai was the 5th most congested city in the world, Bengaluru 10th, New Delhi 11th. India early mover in green energy, but here, very interesting, solar generation capacity has risen 17 times in the last 8 years. So we can say glass half empty, glass half full. But that's one question to you. The second is that is on the, Nirmala Sitharaman, according to Yashwant's index, has not done very well. So are we saying then that the economy is not something of great importance to Indians?
No, it is. And in fact, Nirmala Sitharaman not doing well is indicative of it. I don't think in any survey.
You think it's indicative of the fact that,
yeah, exactly. In fact, any finance minister is going to have a very, very difficult time, even if you put Narendra Modi's name at finance minister, he will do badly there compared to Narendra Modi as a prime minister, given price rise and other economic concerns people have. Governance issues have always been there, and they do matter to voters. It's not the only issue on which voters decide on whom they are going to vote for. And some of the data that you quoted basically tells about our status, right? India is, if I don't not use the word poor, we are underdeveloped economy, right? And big population, low levels of state capacity to do many of those things, very few skilled sector employment opportunities. So in that sense, all those data which like pollution is a problem across the North Indian Gangetic Plain. So none of these problems are basically, they can be solved by any government in 5 years, right? No matter what kind of majority they have. But I think the bigger issue, and this is where I think we should also look at Narendra Modi's 8 years, is where things have not moved as much as we should have liked it to move. And given Narendra Modi representing a right-wing party, if you look at US, there are climate change deniers. At least in India, Prime Minister Modi bats from the front that, climate change is a problem. Still, we have not been able to make a big headway on what we are going to do on the pollution front. November, December, and January month is basically a nightmare across the North Indian Gangetic Plain. So that would be a problem. Second, and this is a political question which we were also talking about. The conversation is not happening across the aisle. The elite compact or the consensus is broken, and it's also reflective in what people and many of these institutions have basically calling that India is becoming partly unfree, meaning that our democracy is sliding down, civil liberties are under strain. And so that's another area of great concern. This is also reflection of a party system that has changed, but it's also a reflection of the inability of a prime minister to able to start a dialogue. He is the prime minister of the country today, and this will be his legacy, right? If the gap basically widens and not narrows. And so he should be doing something about this also.
Right. So last couple of questions, Yashwant, to you. Rahul, when you were missing, when your Bijli failed, I was asking Yashwant by the question, after Modi who, which he has not answered, but maybe that's 5 years down the line. So I think a lot will happen in the next 5 years. But let me ask you the foreign policy question, in which Prime Minister Modi has done, in my opinion, very, very well across the board. He is acknowledged as a leader across the board, including in large parts of South Asia. But the Pakistan question, explain to me whether Pakistan is a domestic issue or is it a foreign policy issue?
Both. I guess that will remain in that way. Foreign policy in terms of we look at Pakistan as a short-term or long-term issue, and domestic issue as and when there would be troubles because of the cross-border infiltrations or the law and order issues, over here. So that is going to remain there. But one another interesting thing is that I also believe that a big part of India, we recently concluded a research for and I believe that within the next 6 months that university will be putting out the results. But broadly speaking, it was interesting for me to see the data that people largely do not consider Pakistan as a problem. Probably because in their mind they feel that we can deal with Pakistan. It's something. But for them, China is a problem. And it was a very interesting study. I cannot divulge much of the details over there because of obvious integrity of the data, that they have the rights. But that is in sync with other studies that we have done in the past. Okay. That Indians have more or less stopped taking Pakistan as an issue because of largely a confidence that इनसे निपट सकते हैं. ये अब वैसा सिरदर्द नहीं है. We can deal with that. But the dealing with China is altogether a different, animal altogether in that way. People's mind, when you talk about the same question about regarding China, people are taking their time to answer. They are not jingoistic. नहीं China को उठा के पटक देंगे और हम करके तो देखें. No. And it's heartening to see even the lesser educated people having a clear idea about these things. You feel like पढ़ा लिखा है वो इसका जवाब देंगे, ऐसा नहीं है ज्योति. Even the non-formal education sector वाले जो बड़ा अपने यहाँ का तादाद है, they are very clear about these things. In fact they are even clearer about so many things. And by the way, just to tell you that in the ranking, Mr. Jaishankar gets into the top 5.
Yeah, he does very well.
He is not a politician at all. Now, how a non-political figure, rather because of the foreign minister tag attached to it, people are not rating Mr. Jaishankar as an individual. People are probably rating his ministry that, okay, it has done rather well. And the more the education, that approval rating goes up. That is true. But the same is also true, funnily, about Nitin Gadkari. The education and income level goes up, and Nitin Gadkari's approval ratings also go up in a big way. So something about the delivery of the governance, policy level interventions or things people are appreciating. And by the way, even the opposition voters are appreciating. That doesn't mean they are going to vote and support everything. They are not appreciating what Modi government is. And to cap it all, yes, economy is in bad shape. People are saying, a huge majority of people in India right now saying that it is difficult to manage their kitchen at this point of time. रसोई चलाना मुश्किल हो रहा है. बिल्कुल. ये वही सर्वे है, वही सैंपल है, वो ये भी कह रहा है. तो इसमें कोई contradiction नहीं है. It only tells about the clarity of the thought process. People are saying, हाँ, economy की वाट लगी हुई है, हमें जॉब नहीं मिल रहा है, हमारे घर के खर्चे चलाने मुश्किल हो रहे हैं, महंगाई आसमान छोड़ के भाग गई है. ये सब दिक्कतें हैं. लेकिन जहां पे मोदी सरकार की तारीफ करनी है वो तारीफ भी कर रहे हैं. और जहां प्रॉब्लम है, व्हेन यू आस्क दिस क्वेश्चन कि इस प्रॉब्लम का सॉल्यूशन कौन दे सकता है, unfortunately for that opposition names and opposition parties, they are nowhere in that place to fill up that vacuum, because a huge majority of the India now says nobody can find solution to this.
Nobody can find, or only Modi Sarkar can find.
Number 2 पे मोदी आ रहे हैं. But a huge chunk of more than majority, 50% people are saying nobody can find a solution right now among the given lot. So the desperation है, लोग परेशान हैं, लेकिन उस परेशानी के कारण आप ये सोचें कि वो अपोजिशन उस वैक्यूम को भर पा रहा है, ऐसा नहीं है. और they are very honest to the core in calling where the failure is the failure, and their people on the street are also honest to the core in saying the success is a success.
Right.
They are giving full marks on the vaccination program. They are giving full marks on many other things, including infrastructure and other things which are happening. But Absolutely. They are brutally honest and telling that economy is messed up. I am unable to run my kitchen the way I used to run. They are brutally honest about it. That's very welcome, refreshing thing to have, rather than looking at the things in the binaries that all of us, actually, all the analysts, including me, Rahul, and you also.
And we fall into that, absolutely. Yeah. Rahul, the question to you is on the minority question. And actually, we haven't even talked about caste in the last 45 minutes, which is also interesting in its own way. And does that mean that all these governance issues and the other have subsumed caste? But the question to you, Rahul, is about minorities. Do they feel increasingly secure or insecure under the Modi government?
In comparison to past, I think the vulnerabilities of Muslims in certain parts of India has certainly increased. And this is where we should start. Like, if you look at the data, Muslims in Kerala or Muslims in Bengal are not going to react in the same way as Muslims in Uttar Pradesh is going to be. It's just situation, basically their context and situation. Certainly, I think they feel more vulnerable compared to the past. There have been numerous incidents where they have been targeted, and these are, of course, these are like 1 or 2 or 5 examples. But what happens when there is a continuous conversation on social media, in mainstream media, on that how someone was lynched for eating beef or something like that, it creates a sense of vulnerability and also fear. And I think on that question, there is no doubt in my mind, compared to past, that has increased. And this also now, and I think this is where PM can again start thinking what his legacy is going to be. More than, I think this also reflects the failure of parties like Samajwadi Party and Rashtriya Janata Dal. But going forward, what we need to think is, how are we going to bring, what would be the new compact with the biggest religious minorities of the country, right? There are attempts, you may call that this is just a jumla baji, but it seems that attempts from the top, both from the Prime Minister as well as from RSS Chief Mohan Bhagwat, there has been signals and indications that a conversation needs to take place. But I think that conversation would now require full capital or full political capital of both these leaders. Because without them, without their signal, things on the ground will keep increasing the vulnerabilities of the Muslims. And this is not good for both BJP as well as for India.
No, but when you said both leaders, you presumably you're meaning RSS Chief Mohan Bhagwat and Prime Minister Modi. But
yes.
in many cases, we have seen in these last 8 years, especially when lynchings have taken place or other such matters, that the Prime Minister has kept very quiet.
So PM, yes, and PM cannot intervene or speak on everyday basis. But you have also seen PM coming out and speaking against lynching, right? So it has taken, should it take him that much time? I don't know. But while these issues will continue to happen, I think what I'm trying to say, that this is a very, very bad situation going forward. Muslims are basically losing out of representation because of growing polarization in the society, right? Now, given it seems like BJP is winning election, Muslim representation is going down. So they don't have enough politicians in power or as MLAs or MPs who Muslims can go for their everyday solutions or everyday problems, right? And so going forward, this situation is going to be problematic. And that's why there has to be a compact, because during the election campaign, the pitch from both sides is so high that it seems now there are basically a Hindu India and a Muslim India. Whereas we all know that in reality, these two groups coexist in our villages and our town and they live, right? And so there has to be a new political compact that needed to be forged. And perhaps this can come only from the top, from an initiative by Prime Minister Modi and RSS chief and some other leaders involved from the Hindu side and the Muslim side. Without, now it's like, for me, the 75 years have passed, but if you don't forge a contract, a social contract, you can't put things that, oh, we have written this in a law. So what we have been doing so far, we have been pushing the constitutional state line. At the end of the day, citizenship is also a social act. It's not just a political, constitutional and legal act. So there has to be a conversation now to take place on the social aspect of integration.
Yashwant, you have the last word. If what Rahul is saying is that the Muslim community, 14% of India's population, 200 million people, that's a large number, a lot of people. If they are slowly seceding from politics, or if you like, the general politics of our country, then that is also almost dangerous, isn't it?
Okay, let me end with the good, bad, and ugly of this. Let me start with the good first. Good is that we have also seen that the social welfareism, which is now hallmark of electoral politics, I mean, in winning elections, is quite secular, and it's quite equal opportunity, because we know that majority of the social welfareism schemes of even Prime Minister Modi, or for that matter, even Yogi, they have been benefiting even the Muslims as well as the Hindus. We have, even after so much of wrong that is going around, we have at least, thank God for that, not heard of cases where we see discrimination in social welfareism, schemes of social welfareism because of the religious lines. So let's see the brighter side of it. Okay, that has been going on.
Okay.
Second good thing is that in one of our trust in institution polls, which we again carry out at the Rugil interval, and I wrote a piece for the print, by the way, if I'm not wrong on that, that Muslims at large, just like the Hindus or the Sikhs or the Christians and everybody else, they trust the institutions of India and they do not trust BJP. While they are mistrust or distrust in the BJP should not be treated as they not trusting the democracy or institution or the idea of India. These are two different things.
Right.
You know, me supporting or opposing Modi is not equivalent to me supporting or opposing democracy.
Right.
You know, that's a good thing. That's a very nice thing to have.
Huh.
Bad thing is the polarization or at least the narrative of the polarization is real, happening, and because of that narrative and the situation on the ground, yes, huge majority of the minorities are also feeling alienated or feeling as if they are not really part of what it used to be. All right, there is a sense of vulnerability in them. That's bad. What is ugly is that everybody, including you, me, media, politicians, and everybody, we are only focusing on the bad thing, which is going to polarize it further, rather than focusing on the good things, which can probably unite. Like, for example, this ratings of ministers. You know, I'm rather happy that, okay, people who are talking about governance, people who are talking about sobriety in politics, they are being, rated
Absolutely.
better by the electorate.
Yes.
That's a lovely sign for me. That's a lovely sign for me. And also my hope, big hope lies in the ultimate polarization, which I wish India to polarize, if that is the foreign line. That is the gender polarization, where I clearly see females of this country voting on the real issues of governance, real issues of livelihood and other things of day-to-day problems, rather than the males of this country, where, you know, issues of casteism, religious identity and other things still matter to be a voting issue for them. For the females, it is not coming out to be like that. So that is the kind of polarization, if we can talk about, good and healthy. Otherwise, we are having serious problem at our end.
चलिए आपके मुंह में घी शक्कर यशवंत, and as always the women of India will lead.
Absolutely.
And on this note, thank you both gentlemen so much for your time. It is really an education for me, and I'm sure for all my viewers at The Print, to hear you both. Thank you, Yashwant Deshmukh and Rahul Verma, for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you again.